this is an opening paragraph that didn't have a story with it. I was in China last year. I was teaching at a university in Zhejiang, doing a workshop on science fiction with a bunch of other writers. And at some point, the students I had were workshopping the opening to those stories, and I felt like I should become involved. I should make an effort, and I wrote an introduction to a story. And that's all it was. It was simply a sample of how I thought one way of writing a story in a way that I thought was quite effective. And so that's all I had. I didn't have a story. I sort of gave it a title that was a working title. It's in the end, this isn't actually the final title of the story, but I called it Once Upon a Time in Zhejiang, and I wrote this opening. And that's where it was. I left it there. And it was months later that I thought, I thought I still like this opening. I wonder if I can write the rest of this story. And I ended up writing it. And so this is one of the few stories I have where I can pinpoint exactly how I wrote it and why I wrote it and what I did in it. And so I thought I'll take you through that story and what that story does and what techniques it uses and so on and so forth. So there's a few reasons why I like this opening. And for the first section, I'll really just look at a few openings, a few classic openings as well and what they do. Because an opening, and think about if you're writing a short story and submitting a short story, there's a lot of people doing that. And so as an editor, as a slash reader, you're sitting there reading opening after opening after opening. And the easiest way to reject a story is to just go, that didn't hook me, that didn't interest me, and to reject the story. It's always the first thing you read. And so a good opening has to convince the reader to keep reading. It tries to convince the reader that you know what you're doing. And so in this particular one, I wrote it for a very specific reason. I wanted to show the students how I can fake knowing, knowing Xinjiang. Because I've only been there for a few days. I'm not Chinese. I don't live in Xinjiang. My understanding is that it's mostly famous because there was a bridge accident 10 years ago in Xinjiang, which is the only reason it was ever on the news. But I was able to draw on the things that I saw and experienced while I was there briefly. So in Zhejiang, in the hot summer months, the white moths, restless and huge, flow drunkenly to the evening lights of pool halls and hot pot diners, causing a disturbance of the peace. That was my opening line. Now, the huge white moths were huge white moths that I saw. The pool halls and the hot pot diners were there for the students. So I was able to simply draw on what I was doing, what I was seeing, but causing a disturbance of the peace is a nice little addition there because it's telling us something's not quite right. Something's going to go off. It sounds very peaceful and serene on the surface, but already in the first line, we have a disturbance. We have something about to change. And that's sort of what a story starts doing. It tells you something is going to change, something is going to happen. The air is scented with hot oil and Szechuan peppers, what is the smell of the hot pot? Humid in the constant anticipation of rain. It was 34 degrees when I was there, so that was an easy one to do. In the distance, the mountains rise shrouded in mist, the roads twisting and dangerous to pass. Now, that may sound like just a sentence, but that is based on going into the mountains at some point. And indeed, as we were coming back down these very dangerous twisting roads, we saw a car that just had an accident and flipped over on its side. So again, just drawing on other people's misfortune, as it were. The moon shines down like an ancient relative looking down affectionately on the young, which is just a nice little, flourish. And then we sort of get to the start of the story proper. So this was all setting. And then on one such a night, a robot, somewhat elderly and in the robes of a traveling monk, came to Mrs. Zhang's fruit stand and asked to purchase a watermelon. And that was the only opening I had. And one reason this opening is kind of a nice example opening is because I could give this to you and you could take it in a completely different direction to the one I took it to. Because all we know is a robot shows up and it wants to buy a watermelon. And the question is why? Who is this robot? What does this robot want? and why is it buying a watermelon? So we have, in a good opening, we have questions that need answering. We have the where, the who, the what, the how, and the why. And the why is really why we keep reading. We want to find out what happens next, ideally. We want to find out why this robot came to buy a watermelon in Xinjiang. And the way we're building these openings, we're trying to get some of the senses in. We want to get people to feel and smell and touch and hear everything. Can't necessarily fit it all in, but we have the hot oil and Szechuan peppers, we have the drunken moths, we have um, we have the details that tell us that even if we don't know this place, the writer is at least pretending very hard that they know this place. And we have some unanswered questions that ideally we would like to answer. And also, I like the fact that we have the anticipation of rain, we have the disturbance of the peace, we have the dangerous to pass. We have these tiny little clues here that things are going to get interesting. They're not there by accident, they're there to foreshadow what's coming. Even though I had no idea what was coming at that point, I was just doing a bit of a technical exercise.